I think Rick solved the problem, so thanks very much. First of all, it's great to be with you, Rick. And also I want to shout out to Emma and also to Ambassador Belloni. Actually, the reason that the International Chamber of Commerce is very happy to participate in this B7 discussion is because of the seriousness with which the Italians as leaders of the G7 this year and the B7 are talking about, I think, one of the biggest challenges we see, which is how do we overcome the erosion of trust between advanced economies and developing emerging economies? And this will go to the point about growth. And I think Matthias talked, what he was discussing a little before, I wasn't present, but I caught up with him on Tuesday in Paris about one of the challenges, which is, you want to have a global inclusive framework that works around tax. It doesn't help to have divergent regulatory movements, and we're seeing that already coming out of particularly the Group 77 of the United Nations. And why does that happen? That happens because there's a narrative which has taken hold, particularly in the global world, that the advanced economies, frankly, are ripping off developing emerging economies. I speak frankly, ultimately I'm Australian, so I tell it as I see it. And I see the historic role of the ICC. We're in 170 countries, 70% in the global south. I've reformed and reconstructed our governance model. We have now 25% membership from Africa in our governing body. We're probably the most inclusive business organisation in the world. And in that context, what do you do with a platform like that? Well, actually, one of our jobs is to ensure the inhibitors to growth, which is the emergence of divergent regulatory approaches, is diminished. That there's actually an increase in the level of cooperation between advanced economies and developing emerging economies. And that's why I think the leadership that Italy is showing, both at business level, the B7 and the G7, really demands our attention, which is why we're here. Because we believe that there's a necessity for a bridge to enable that to happen. I do think that's the historic role of the ICC in this context. Because if it does not avert the regulatory divergence, then exactly what Rick was talking about before will actually come to pass. The fact of the matter is if you want to get global growth moving again, the greatest vector which is neglected is actually trade. Trade now lags global GDP growth in a way that it hasn't for tens and tens of years. Previously, let's not muck around, trade comprises 75% of global GDP. And if that's not growing at a faster pace at the moment, then we're never going to get there. And so if we don't get agreement on the need to maintain a functioning multilateral trading system, then this will go backwards. And if it continues to erode, the point I'm making is that I put together the business advisory group that negotiated the WTO. The narrative, which is not well understood here, the big losers out of the erosion of the multilateral trading system are not advanced economies. It's the global south. 40% drop in trade flows in sub-Saharan Africa with the erosion. 25% in Latin America. So when the G7 leaders talk about maintaining the multilateral trading system, and then their actions don't follow, and at the same time they talk about the need to engage with developing economies, they're actually undermining the actual purpose that they've articulated. And frankly, as we've discussed with developing economies, it's critical that they seize the narrative back, and they're part of emerging, developing this convergent approach towards multilateral trade. And of course, we are not going to make any progress of substance on climate with the erosion of trust. So we need to rebuild that. And of course, that is one of the big challenges, I think, for the private sector. And that's, of course, an activity that we are 100% engaged with at the ICC.
You said we have touched an historical law in your answer. And then, of course, you said we need to build a bridge. This expression, bridge, has been used many times today. So I wonder how your organization, given the fact you are so present in so many countries in the global south, can help to build this bridge.
Well, first of all, bridges need foundations, and the critical foundation here is one of mutual trust, just to be very clear. And cooperation means you actually put the interests of the other side at the same level as your own. You don't presume what those interests are, you understand them and align them. We're very good at that, so just make that point. But very practically, so with the illegal invasion of Ukraine, obviously there's a response. There's the use of sanctions. One of the consequences of the invasion has been the drying up of access to food, just for the immediate. We saw it very quickly in Ecuador, important economies with the collapse of the banana market, etc. And so we galvanized to actually then bring to the attention of the multilateral development banks the need to create new facilities. We then actually participated, and for the first time ever actually, the UN Secretary General created a group for institutional response, which included the private sector, which was the Global Crisis Response Group, which we were actually invited to participate in. And in that context, what we took into that was the need to ensure that there was access to food and food security in developing and emerging economies. We actually conceived of the Black Sea Agreement at the ICC and took that forward. That's a very practical intervention.
That's a practical intervention. Do you see something like that can work?
Well, it did work. And now the challenge we've got with the pause and the withdrawal of that agreement by the Russians is that we've been working with Rebecca Grinsman, who's the co-chair of that, and me on creating version number 2. But we're actually doing stuff like in Gaza. I don't know if we're talking about that much today, but in Gaza, the ICC has a huge presence in the Islamic world. So it's a very important issue for us. We condemn absolutely the terrorist attack, but we also have to be focused on the humanitarian issue. So on a practical basis, what we are really good at, one of our genius is trading across borders, facilitating movement of goods across borders. So we have created the private sector humanitarian alliance with the Schmidt Foundation. And what we've done quite particularly is enable the movement of medical supplies which are critical to neurosurgery in Gaza through the facilities that we have. We've actually coordinated trade facilitation on that, so we bring together all the partners. And now, of course, what we're doing is looking forward to a Palestine emerging. Of course, that's a D+1 or the day after discussion. But if we're not focused on what we can do, which is then creating economic opportunities and enabling citizens and individuals in the territories there to find a livelihood, then we are failing, I think, in supporting the private sector in a critical part of the world, which actually, if we don't pay attention to it, we may lose from engagement with open free markets as well. So these are very practical things that we're involved with. So we do policy, we can set standards. Our standards enable $17.5 trillion worth of economic activity, and we do stuff on the ground.
Yeah, well, rebuilding things, being there for an economic reason, could also help to build the first point you said, which I think is the challenge we have, to build a trust. Because I've been in Syria last year, and they were like, you have your own narrative, which doesn't involve us. So the problem is that we are perceived as others, and we need to build this trust, because these people don't trust us. So I think this is a concrete example that can serve, of course.
Well, they trust us to Syria. ICC Syria sits at the same table as ICC China, as ICC US. ICC Iran sits at the same table as ICC Israel. We are the largest second-track diplomatic network, and we keep it based, keep it functioning, because we're united in a common purpose, which is enabling business worldwide.